Okay, so good morning. Could you please give me a brief introduction of who you are and what you do?
Yes. My name is Nestor Infanzon. I'm a fellow of the American Institute of Architect. I am currently a professor of the practice. I am a practicing architect, so I have been in practice since 1976, and I generally have practiced with large firms. So my experience is sort of kind of both local as well as international.
For the architecture, and what was the biggest challenge and attraction of being a licensed architect?
The one thing that I always was fascinated with the profession of architecture was the ability to be problem solvers. It's an opportunity to really solve problems on behalf of our users and the community. So I always was fascinated with what can we do to sort of better the quality of the life of the people that use our buildings. So that sort of motivated me to go to school, as well as I've always had a fascination for music as well as art and other sort of fine arts opportunities, photography and so forth. So I've always been really interested in how you sort of blend those two, in having the opportunity to work on projects that they are diverse, and as well as of different levels of complexity. It has always allowed me to sort of continue to seek that goal of growing and sort of how do we better serve our community as a whole. It is something that I've sort of have felt that architects, and especially in the latter years, in the last 20, 30 years, that our profession has need to go back and reconnect to the fact that architects are really should have been or should be leaders in our community, not just simply by doing good design, but their commitment to cultural issues or community issues or political issues. Because of our training as problem solvers, we're able to sort of look at a variety of different options and opportunities and sort of seek out and lay out a map that actually works to solve the issues that we're facing.
How would you describe your work style as an architect?
I've always, how my work style is sort of kind of like, it's very uncommon. I'm not a very lineal. I'm sort of kind of like, I seek out for information and I seek for inspirations in different ways. Sometimes, I'll do it while I'm listening to music. Sometimes I do it by just picking up my camera and walking around and taking photographs and using those moments as way to sort of filter through the actual problem. I like to think about what the problem is, what the issue is, what exactly is it that you're supposed to be doing, and then challenge that with the question of what if? What if you do this versus doing that? What is the implications of that consequence? And see how that sort of gets evolved. I am constantly sketching. I got tons of sketchbooks. I'm constantly reading. As you can see, I got tons of books. I find opportunities to sort of divest myself into different avenues. Currently, I am reteaching myself how to play guitar. I'm also doing some studies on photography and learning how to do printing, digital printing as an avenue from the old-fashioned just printing on the darkroom. And I'm extremely fascinated with the art of hacking. What is it that makes a computer hacker do what they do, and how do they can sort of visualize the program and sort of find loops and holes and things of that nature. I love to read. I probably read about a book a week. My wife and I have started this tradition since the pandemic started of going, watching one movie together. Every week we watch a new movie and it's just different. So I'm personally constantly looking at what's going on out there and sort of figure it out how that then converts itself into sort of like a creative path. I also firmly believe that there are individuals who are linear. You do this, you answer a question, you come with an answer, sort of more of a scientific method. That's also a viable option for individuals. But for me, I'm sort of more scattered. I just sort of move around and check out. And I also like to, when I'm working on a project, I change my point of view. At one point, I'm looking at it as a designer. The next point of view, I'm looking at as what happens, how much it's going to cost. And then I turn back and look at it as a designer, or then I turn back and look at it as a client. What would a client do? Or what would the client think? And at times I put myself in the role of the user. If I'm a student and I'm in a classroom, how do I'm going to feel in this classroom? Or how do I feel in the corridor? How do I feel in the bathroom? Or how do I feel on the entrance? Or how do I see the building when I'm driving on the street? Because for me, the sum total of all the experiences that you have is really what the building is. And so those experiences are not linear either. Sometimes you recognize aspects in different locations. And so I tried as my best to keep looking at the same thing from different points of view and asking, different questions about it. So with my students, it's really easy. When I'm teaching a studio, I usually advise my students that, first thing that they need to realize is that it's not my project, it's their project. So if you were one of my students, Adrian, I'm not going to tell you how to use your project because I'm not Adrian. I'm here to tell you what you need to do in order to get Adrian's project to come to the surface. I'll ask you why you make that decision, and I'll tell you, well, the consequence of that decision is this, or you didn't think about this as part of your decision-making process, which again is that opportunity to sort of look at the project, ask yourself questions, and then rebuttal yourself and say, hey, what if I would have done something different? I'm also a believer that, you learn from mistakes. Successes are great, but mistakes is where you learn a lot because you learn to recognize what are those sort of pitfalls that you're going to find and what are issues that you completely disregard, whether they're real or not real, or whether you make the wrong assumption. But it's an opportunity you to go back and say, hey, I need to think about this more seriously, or this is something more important that makes sense for me.
I mean, being a licensed architect, do you guys have a flexible schedule, or you guys make your own schedule?
That question has two answers. When as a professional working on a firm, my schedule is pretty much set for me. So as far as the schedule or flexibility when you have at the school as a licensed architect is slightly different. My daily routine at the schools are divided into periods in preparation for studio, periods in preparations in meetings with the students, periods and preparations in meetings with faculty in order to sort of maintain the curriculum. And then there are periods that are dedicated to the other things that I'm working on, such as the relooking at our curriculum in order to be in compliance with accreditation criteria, looking at content of studios in order to meet some other aspects of the program. And so there's a handful of different things. As far as secondary responsibility, as a licensed architect, I assist students in their internships. I give them and oversee the work that they're doing, especially the public work and that kind of stuff. So, hold on. Can you hear my dogs? Or they're gone? So we work on a variety. The beauty of transitioning from a non-licensed architect to a licensed architect as an individual, it gives you two sets of elements. One is the opportunity to have a stronger voice on what you're trying to communicate to others. It gives you a level of credibility, instant credibility. You can say, oh, I'm a licensed architect. But it also has a second part of it, which is also has a responsibility to it. As a licensed architect, you need to always be aware that whatever you say you need to make sure that such comments and recommendations are for the betterment of society and the protection of the individual. So you have that sort of ins and outs. It's something that I've always counsel my students when I teach professional practice, that the challenge that you have as a licensed architect is now you can get sued, and that's really is because what you say has a standing in court, whereas a non-licensed architect, you're just like anybody else.
Have you ever gotten, as a licensed architect, have you gotten critiques from other architects?
Yes, we have always had. When I worked at RTKL years ago, we always brought other architects to review our projects. So I personally have had my work reviewed. I have also served in design award juries, both state, local, and national. I was on the National AIA Design Awards jury and reviewing other architects' work, which included site visits to look at the buildings and actually stand face to face and talk to the users and the community, which is a great lesson because sometimes photographs are real nice. And when you go and see the building, you realize that they're really great photographs. They're not really good buildings. So it's a big difference there. And I've always welcomed and have found that having a discussion with somebody else who is reviewing your project should be taken as a lessons learned. It's the opportunity to see somebody else who's looking at your work maybe from a different perspective, maybe looking at the problem from a different angle, and then deciding that what you did is slightly wrong. And again, this goes back to to what I was telling you earlier. It is not Nestor's job, or it is not Adrian's job. It's who the person who did it is the person who has the reasons why the decisions were made. You as an observer, you can ask questions and say, hey, have you thought about this, or have you thought about that, or how did you get to that point, and so forth, to better understand that. I've also found that in practice that I got into a habit of listening to my clients and my consultants, and once they were finished telling me something, I will go back and say, now, correct me if I'm wrong. Is this what you're telling me? So to kind of restate back to them what I thought I heard, so you can then really start understanding those things that you're filtering out of the equation. Sometimes, when we're listening, we're waiting to hear those words that we want, and we forget everything else in between. And sometimes the in between is where the real jewels are, because those are the real problems that people have, and that's what you're supposed to do. Crits are always important. You should, as a student or as a professional, you should always welcome anybody who can talk to you about your work. Whether it's positive or negative, it's irregardless. It doesn't make any difference. The lessons that you're going to get is that then you get to understand how other people view your work, or try to understand your work that may give you an opportunity to sort of grow. And that's really all we can do, is just keep growing on our profession.
How do you talk to a client without getting nervous or?
How do I talk to clients? Well, first of all, you've got to understand the mentality of a client. Um, uh, as I had the opportunity once through my career, I was a campus architect at UTEP. So as a client, I try very carefully to explain to my architects, consultants, what exactly was that we were expecting. So when you talk to a client, you want to make sure that you listen carefully to what they're saying, and then you ask questions to sort of find out what exactly is the issue that they're facing. Sometimes they may tell you, I really need this done. And once you start asking them, okay, so why are we trying to do this? Or what is the benefit of that? Or how are you going to achieve this? You realize that there's a secondary or tertiary issue at hand. And then you make those distinctions. That's one thing that, we always encourage our client, our employees or workers or young architects to develop as a skill, is how to talk to individuals or clients. The other lesson that I've always have, and I try to explain to other people, is clients are the ultimate individual. If the client says it's raining and you look out the window and it's sunny, you better get your umbrella. Simply because in his world, he thinks it's raining. Now, what you have to do is understand what is it that he's trying to get you. So clients do have the ultimate say so, but it is not what they said, it's what they intend or what they're trying to imply that is really critical. So I don't encourage anybody to challenge the client. This is not about challenging, you're wrong. That's not what it is. Clients are never wrong. And I've been in situations where the client has point blank said, if you don't get this person out of this room, you're fired, or we're going to terminate the contract with the firm. So you got to make sure that everybody understands about that. The other thing that we try to explain our young interns and as well as our young students is that there was early in the early 70s and 80s, there was this sort of catchphrase going on in the industry. We need to educate our client. We need to educate our client. And what you don't realize is a client is rather extremely educated. He may not be sophisticated, but he's educated and he knows sort of what he wants. He just doesn't know why he wants it. So the idea is that, and again, goes back to understand your client, and then you don't have to educate them. And sometimes they'll give you a better education that you think you're getting. But it's a matter, again, goes back to the other one. You don't challenge them. You basically counsel. And the other thing that we do is, I try to explain my students as well as my friends that we as architects, all we're doing is counseling our clients. We're telling you, if you're going to do this, this is what's going to happen. If you're going to do that, this is the outcomes you're going to have. And they're going to make the decision at the end of the day. Now, if the client tries to move the discussion or the solution into an unethical response or an illegal response, then I, as an architect, and because of my responsibility to society as a whole, I have the responsibility to tell them, sorry, we're not going to do that. And I have been in situations where I have actually turned down a commission or resigned from a commission because of what the owners were asking. It was something that it should never had happened, and something that I'm not getting involved with. So it's a matter, again, goes back to an earlier point, is that it's about what you think you're going to be doing or what you think your role is. And my role in this world is to improve the building environment and the built environment. And I'm not interested, or I'm not willing to do something that is going to cross that line.
And what about the prices on wood and on different structures?
Um, the challenge that you're going to have as an architect is that the cost of construction is going to continue to go up. So that's a fact of life. And I remember when I first started, in the 80s, you can build an office for $30 a square foot. Now you're talking $250 a square foot. It's the same office, it's the same window wall, it's the same floor, it's the same carpet. It's just that it costs more. Resources are becoming um, less plentiful. Technology is becoming more sophisticated. Um, Construction and contractors and construction workers are becoming less and less available. So you may have a shortage of certain specialties. So you need to understand that whatever you do is going to cost money. Now, the challenge that we have, and this is something that, and we can go back and sort of blame the education system, because they rarely in our education system we were ever given a budget and said, if you go over $20, you have to cut $20 off. We were always given sort of kind of blank check. So projects were about imagination, and it was about sort of trying to be different and create something unique. In real life, that doesn't happen. Every time that you draw a line, I had one of my early bosses in life. He used to tell me, when I used to show him my drawings, he would say, that line is going to cost me $10 a linear foot, or that line is going to cost me another $20 a square foot, and that line over there. So he was trying to instill in me the discipline that everything that you draw on paper costs money. It costs money to build. So how we deal with that is that we encourage our kids, our students, and our co-workers to read, to attend seminars, to look at magazines and publications, and go do join the AIA and go to tours of buildings and talk to the contractors when they do the speech and ask questions, and so they can understand the impact of the cost of the building. We also encourage them to become aware of what the construction environment is. For example, in El Paso, you only have one or two mechanical contractors. So the MEP portion of any building in El Paso costs a lot more money than in Houston, because we got over 50 contractors here that do MEP. So there's a huge difference. In El Paso, concrete work and brickwork is less expensive than is in Houston, because you have a large amount of workers. So the labor cost is low. Over here, we don't have that. The labor cost in Houston is more expensive. So if you understand the regional uniqueness, you should be able to start to understand the financial implication of your design. We also encourage my employees and associates and my students is, when in doubt, ask. Go find yourself either a contractor or somebody who teaches in the construction department, or somebody that can give you the answer, because there is people out there who have those answers, and you get them, and then you go, okay, now I understand. The trick becomes, when you're in teaching, is that you don't want to stifle the creativity at the expense of doing things that you can't really financially afford. So once somebody comes out with one of those really mind-blowing designs, then becomes your job, my job as a faculty member, is explain to them the implications of the structural systems, the cost, the construction, the schedule, all of those things that he needs to consider as he's making those decisions. And then you learn to figure out what the trade-off. You can do that and use this particular skin because it's less expensive, or you can do this and use a very more expensive skin because the building is more simpler. So it becomes, again, it's not about the wrong answer. It's just trying to make the design to be exactly what you have envisioned and within the context and parameters of the aspects that you have to meet.
How do you balance the function with aesthetics appealing to a building?
The aesthetics of the building, it's kind of twofold. I think that on one hand, we tend to migrate to styles out of preference. When I started architectural school, um, during the early 70s, modernism was really at sort of like it was the big item. So we were all looking at, Luke Kahn, we're looking at Le Corbusier, we're looking at Eero Saarinen, we're looking at that genre of architects. And then as we progressed, we sort of migrated into difference. One of the things that happened to me, which I did not understand for a long period of time, my teachers or my instructors at that time sort of kept us from getting in that bandwagon. They will bring in to the project and say, we're going to design this using, Luke Kahn as an example, or we're going to use this as Richard Myers as an example, or we're going to use this as the Chicago Five, or whatever the architect was. So we learn about migration between stylistics. So we became more of sort of like a fashion designer. You want a wool suit, we'll give you a wool suit. You want a cotton suit, we can give you a cotton suit. And so the idea became that you became very open to a variety of different things. So if you look at my career and you look at all the work that I've done, there isn't a single style. I've got projects that are sort of way too avant-garde, and I got projects that are very well eclectic, but they're driven by the client, they're driven by the community, and they're driven by that. So the one counsel that I give my students is that, first of all, your project is not your wife or your husband, depending on the student. So you're not married to it. So, and yes, you can change. You can make changes. You can actually modify it. So if you start from that idea, then you start working from it. What I do encourage my students is figure out what is it about the style that you like. What is it that particular building, you're looking at. One of the challenges that I have with some of my students is that they come in with 20 photographs they got out of the internet, and they try to put it into their project without understanding what the consequences of those decisions are. So it's really hard for you to say, hey, I'm going to do this in this particular, but then you're going to put this, which is completely different, and they're not connecting to each other. So we try to move back and let them talk about what are the basic elements that hold them together, whether it's a composition, whether it's the rhythm, whether it's the scale, whether it's the materiality, whether it's transparency, whatever it is, we break it down into that and let then the style evolve. Your buildings have to serve its community. So, sometimes your building has to sort of drop down because of everything in your neighborhood has a particular flair. That does not mean that you can't push the envelope. That means that you can actually slowly advance. One of the things that we used to talk about when I was at UTEP is that if you look at the UTEP campus with their style that they have, they projects up to about 1999, 2010 were sort of Bhutanese classic, very simple, straightforward, little ornament. And then we did, then the building came up, that they added a little bit of change. And then the next building came out and they changed the window pattern. And then the next building came out and they changed the color matrix. And then the next window came out and changed the massing and the volume. It's still keeping the vein of the Bhutanese. So slowly what you're doing, you're evolving the style. You're not changing it, but you're evolving it. And that's really is where you as an architect or you as somebody need to be really versed at. If you are asked to design a building in a postmodern vein, you should be able to understand the stylistic implications of it. If you're designing a building in a sort of like Zaha Hadid-esque, then you should understand why the moves that she does are meaningful and how you get to replicate them, not duplicate them, but you get to replicate them. And then you can sort of come up to your own thing. And again, it goes back down to one thing is what is Adrian going to be like? I mean, what is it that makes Adrian unique? And that really is what drives your stylistic endeavors. How often do you venture outside of your comfort zone? How many books or how many buildings or how many cities or how many opportunities you get to experience? How many lectures you listen to? Do you understand what he said? Do you like what he said? You don't have to like it all. You can like bits and pieces, and then eventually you create your own individual style. I always tell this to my students, good architects are like good chefs. There's 10,000 ways to do a chicken soup. It's still chicken, it's still noodles, and it's still water. But there's 10,000 ways of doing it. And each individual one is still a good chicken soup. That's what you are. You are going to be making that chicken soup. Your building is that chicken soup. And it's just how do you understand the idea of seasonings, the idea of the chicken, the idea of the vegetables, how long you cook them, all of this is what makes your style and the uniqueness of your projects.
And have you worked, different projects in same schedule?
I have, there was a time in during my career that I worked on one project and one project alone. As I matured and grew up within the context of the firms, I had times where I've been working on 4 or 5 projects at a time, where you have multiple people working with me, where I serve as the senior project designer, and then they're the project designer. And I've also worked in firms where I have been the design director for multiple offices, where I have multiple senior designers working with me. And so my job at that point in time, it's more of at that level, your job is to make sure that the design quality is where you want it, that the client's expectations have been heard and have been resolved, and that you're within the budget and or within the financial limitations that the firm has placed on it, and that you're able to keep up the direction. One of the things that we always had problems when I worked at a firm and we were doing projects in the UK, in London, and the designers over there didn't understand what we were trying to do because the client wanted an American style hospital. They were doing British style hospital, and we kept saying, no, you can't do that, you have to do this. And halfway through actually the completion of CDs, we had to basically scrap the project and start from scratch again. We don't get repaid, we just have to draw faster. So as you get to that level, then it's a matter of making sure that the people working for you are in the same pace that you are. Working on 2 projects at the same time is not a big issue. One of the things that I like about teaching is that you're working on 23 projects simultaneously. I'm not doing 23 variations to the same project. I'm doing 23 unique individual projects because each student has his own his own expectations and his own goals. My job is make sure that they're moving in the right direction. So yeah, and the one thing that you learn at that level is that you learn to speed up the process. As an individual, if I draw this and then I look at it, then I can draw that. But you're at this point, and then the person next to you have already taken 3 steps ahead of you. So you're having to change where you are in your filters, which allow you to sort of look at everybody and say, okay, this person is going to get to this problem, or this person needs to be expedited here. Yeah. Leadership in design or any firm, it's really about you understanding where you are in relationship to where everybody else needs to be. Good leaders are the ones that make you look good and make you grow. Because if you grow, that means I don't have to worry about that. I can move into something else, which is something that I learned a long time ago. Is you try to hire people who are better than you so they can take your job really soon, and then you can move up. If you want to stay in the same space, just hire people who are not who are just as good as you are, and they're not willing to grow. But if you find talented people who are going to move you and push you, you sort of continue to grow a lot faster than any place else. Yeah.
And being a licensed architect, do you just design for that specific state, or can you go different states and design for different cities?
That's a bit of a complex question. As a licensed architect, you should be able to work in any state that has a licensure requirement. Now, where is the difficulty comes in that if I want to practice in New Mexico, I have to have a license in New Mexico. If I don't have a license in New Mexico, I have to let the state board in New Mexico know that I am going to be working on a project, or I'm going to be marketing in New Mexico. Each state has specific licensure requirements in terms of marketing and practicing. But as a licensed architect with an NCAR certificate, National Council of Registration Boards, that allows me to sort of speed up the licensure, the reciprocity process, and get a license in different states. I almost got a license in Florida because you have to have a license there. And we also almost got a license in Tennessee because we're working on projects there. Usually licensure for working on different parts of the country or different parts of the world are really held by the firms, because then becomes a corporation, and then you're under the auspices of somebody who oversees your work. But as a licensed architect, as an individual, yeah, you are qualified. You are theoretically qualified to be able to practice in every state, as long as you let the state know that you're doing what you're doing. The licensing exam is the same. The education process is the same. Everything is exactly the same. And that's one of the things that NCARB and the NAP has done, is that in order to everybody be at the same page, everybody goes through the same curriculums and the same licensure exam and the same process. So yeah, it makes it transparent.
Are you working on new projects?
I am working right now. I'm helping a friend of mine on a master plan for a university campus. And I'm also helping another friend of mine. He's got a small retail shop that he needed some drawings. So I'm helping him on that. And so right now, because of, I work, I teach Mondays through Thursdays from 12:30 to 5:30, and Fridays is dedicated to sort of kind of grading and catch up. Most of my consulting work it's limited to sporadic things. I do quality control checks for another friend of mine. He sent me his construction documents, and I spend my evening redlining to make sure that the documents are correct and in accordance. And so I do that. consult friends in terms of what they're doing, give them counsel on contracts or negotiations with particular clients, just basically advice so they can get what they need to do. And from time to time, I sort of help young kids, young interns, decide where they're better, where are they happier or not, whether they like the firm or they're getting the experience and expertise that they need.
What projects do you like the most?
Well, having worked on just about everything in that there is, I've worked in museums and office buildings and houses and hotels and condominiums and, you name it. I have come down to there's two building types that I find to be, for me, the most exciting building types to do. I am a firm believer that hospitals and academic buildings are the most challenging, simply because um, one of them you go to learn, um, and you have people who have different learning styles and different ways of acquiring information. And so your spaces have to be able to help them do that. And they have a huge impact on the user. And hospitals are the same. You either, hospitals are not really, um, people don't have fun memories in the hospitals unless you were born there. Um, if you die there or you had your surgery there or whatever it is, people don't think of it as oh, this is a fun place. But the idea that you have to create a building that people that work there have to be happy and healthy and all this stuff for, endless amount of days. Some of those nurses walk 15, 20, 30 miles a day in the same floor. You have to create environments that they are healthy and exciting and, they feel refreshed. So to me, hospitals and schools are really, the two building types that I really have found the most. And those are, in reality, where I have spent the last maybe 15 years of my professional career has been working either in hospitals or schools.
Have you renovated your house, like the interior, as being an architect?
Yes, I know. I happen to, I'm also married to an architect. My wife is an architect too. We went to schools in two separate periods of time. I went through schools where, my favorite color is white and my wife's favorite color is any color. So we have two very different styles. In terms, I am a diehard. I love simple, clean, modern furniture. She likes ornate. She likes leather. She likes all that stuff. So we have learned to sort of kind of compromise as we go through. And yes, we have done renovations to our houses where we have lived. Um, but we seek, as far as the type of houses that we buy, we try to buy mid-century modern homes or homes that are very stylized. This I live in a condominium. This is a very 1950s open space. Kitchen, living room, dining room is all one room. It's all about white walls and space and volume and light. So we find that kind of environment, and then we do modifications to it. I have helped plenty of friends renovate their homes and do drawings for them and do that. And again, this goes back to one of your earlier questions about style, is understanding what the client, in this case the individual, really wants. I worked on a project where the wife was into glass and steel and the husband was into wood and mahogany and leather. And so that was probably my most difficult project that I ever had, because every time that we presented the scheme, she likes it, he agreed on it, and then when she left the room, she said, no, I want something else. And so you could never get them to agree on anything. So that's why I'm not fond of houses, um, because if you're designing a home, you're really a marriage counselor, and I am not trained to be a marriage counselor. And and it's real difficult to get them to agree if they have so opposite nature. I mean, it's very tough. So, but you know, my view, my view of my home, my future home, is one giant room of wall to wall books on one side and one giant TV on the other side, and two two nice Ames chair that we can sit and watch TV, and my 1970 Yamaha stereo that I can listen to music really loud, and our stainless steel kitchen cabinets and stuff like that. So it's really simple, uh, but that's not what Adrian likes. That's not what Pedro or Mary or Joe likes. That's what we like, and my wife and I have agreed on that. We add color once in a while. We have a red door, and we've painted bedrooms blue or pink depending on our mood. But we change those. Those gets changed about every 6 to a year. We don't they don't sit there too long.
And have you and your wife and worked in a same project?
My wife and I have, for almost 35 years, worked in different firms, competing firms, except for a 3-year period that she worked for me. Um, Her mom was suffering with Alzheimer's, and so she had to take care of her. And so she came to work in the same firm that I was working with, and we worked on the same projects together. We were doing hospitals in the UK, and so we were doing projects in the UK and also Michigan and Arizona. And so we got to travel together working on the same project. She was the healthcare planner and I was the building designer. So she had her area of expertise and I have my area of expertise. So she's an incredibly talented designer. Um, so I don't argue with her. You know, we may not agree on a lot of things, but I understand her point of view. And I'm like I said, if she's driving the bus, it's her bus. All I can tell her is, hey, have you thought about this or have you thought about that? And have her process that information and make the decision that she has to make. I have very rarely in my career gone to a young designer and said, here, draw this. You know, the only time that has happened is when the client said, hey, I need this change and I need a change now because your designer is not listening to me. Then we'll draw it and said, here, this is what the client wants. Just get it done.
That was my last question. So,
One before you go, and I know that this is your first interview. You're doing good, so stay there. Um, One piece of advice for everybody, and I know that you guys are young and eager to get into the profession. Architecture it's a complex and complicated career. It's got its ups and downs. It's got challenges because a lot of people don't understand what architects do. Uh, and it's got some great opportunities because you are able to sort of write and rewrite what architects do. So from that perspective, I think that all of you are chosen a great path, but it's a path that requires that you continually grow and you continually change and you continually try to better yourself. So it's a profession that requires you a lot of reading, a lot of traveling, a lot of looking, a lot of questioning, a lot of sketching. There's skill sets that you have to continue to draw, you have to continue to observe, you have to continue to make notes. So, and those are disciplines that you need to get while you're in school. I mean, I told you earlier, I have sketchbooks. I get one of these guys filled every 3 months, and and I've been doing that since 1974. And when I'm not drawing, I feel empty. It's just like you get the itch, you got to draw. Um, we were having, a discussion this past week with the faculty about the challenges of teaching online with the pandemic. And you get the kids saying, well, I don't have the computer program, or I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. And fine. I said, you have a piece of paper and you have a pen, just draw it. I mean, that's the way we've done for decades, and that's the way it's going to be done forever. I mean, there are times when you're meeting with your client and the client doesn't understand what you're doing. Just take a piece of paper and sketch it. That is the ultimate way of communicating. Uh, yes, clients love 3D renderings and fly through all that stuff, but they also have a challenge because they believe that you're done. They don't understand that that's just the preliminary idea. They're looking at this wonderful stuff and say, hey, okay, when can I start building? No, we got to work on this other stuff. So that's why sometimes we talk to all of you guys. Learn to draw, learn to use computer, learn to read, get addicted to reading books, whether they are online or real paper. Get on the habit of walking around your neighborhood or downtown El Paso, wherever you are, and asking you, why do I like this road, or why do I like this street, or what is it about that building that I like? Take a picture of it with your iPhone, or take a picture with your camera, whatever it is, make those documents. Those are the memories and the images that are going to make you a better architect. They're going to make you a better problem solver. So if you can do that, you're going to do great in this profession. You know, not everybody is going to be successful designer, but this profession has people who are great into technology. They have people who are great into putting buildings together. There are people who are management. There are people who are great talking and they become salesmen or marketing development persons. There's the bandwidth of being an architect is a big bandwidth. Everybody thinks that everybody has to be a designer. Now, good designers are rare. People who can get good designers' designs done correctly are even more important. I worked at a firm that we had a guy who can come up with great ideas, but they couldn't get built. It took a handful of individuals to take those ideas, dismantle them, and put them back together in such a way that could actually be built. That's the lesson that I wish all of you can get into. Stay connected, keep looking, keep taking notes, and you'll do really good. So, okay.
Yes, sir.
Well, Adrian, if you don't have any other questions, feel free to call anytime you want. I'm here to help you out.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you, sir. And you have a good day.
You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.